What you're about to hear isn't fiction. These are documented investigations that spiraled into territory no training could have prepared for. Cases where the evidence itself became the threat, where following the clues meant stepping into something that should never have been opened. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and tap the bell for all notifications so you never miss any of our uploads. Before we dive in, leave a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? And what time does your clock say right now? I always find it fascinating knowing who's out there in the dark with me. Let's begin. The moment I plugged in that recovered drive, every monitor in my lab flickered simultaneously, a glitch I'd never encountered in 17 years of forensic data recovery. My name is Corvin Thiel, and I operate a specialized digital forensics firm in Brattleboro, Vermont, contracted primarily by insurance companies and occasionally by law enforcement for cold cases. My job involves pulling information from devices most people would consider unsalvageable. Fire-damaged laptops, waterlogged phones, corrupted servers. In March of 2019, the Windham County Sheriff's Department delivered a package that would fundamentally alter my understanding of recorded media. The hard drive arrived sealed in an evidence bag, caked in what appeared to be calcium deposits and organic residue. According to the intake paperwork, it had been recovered from Briarwell State Psychiatric Institute, a sprawling facility that had been shuttered since 1987. Urban explorers had discovered the drive in a subterranean storage room that wasn't included in any official floor plans. Standard recovery protocol. Nothing about the device seemed unusual beyond its advanced deterioration. I initiated my proprietary restoration software and let the system run overnight. The next morning, my coffee went cold in my hand. The drive contained 847 video files. Timestamps ranged from 1962 to 1985, consistent with the facility's operational years. Security footage, patient interviews, staff meetings, all standard archival material, except for 17 files clustered at the end of the directory. Those 17 files carried timestamps dated after the facility's closure, after the building had been condemned, after it had sat empty for 3 decades. And one particular file, the final entry, displayed a creation date of March 14th, 2019. That was tomorrow. I verified the system clock, checked my workstation's internal calendar, ran diagnostic protocols. Everything confirmed what I already knew. My equipment was functioning correctly. The file with tomorrow's date was 7 minutes and 32 seconds long. Against every professional instinct I possessed, I opened it. The footage showed Briarwell's main corridor, the same hallway I'd seen in dozens of the archival clips, except in this version, the walls were covered in something wet, something dark that glistened under emergency lighting. A figure entered the frame from the left side. They wore a gray jacket, carried a black equipment case, walked with a slight favor to their right knee, and I watched this person move through the corridor, stopping periodically to examine markings on the wall. They pulled out a phone, used it as a flashlight, continued deeper into the structure. The footage quality was exceptional, better than the original 1960s recordings. This was captured on modern equipment, somehow embedded into media that predated its own recording technology. The figure turned toward the camera. I recognized my own face. The video showed me entering Briarwell, showed me walking through those contaminated hallways, showed me finding something in a room at the end of the corridor, though the footage corrupted into static before I could see what. I had never been to Briarwell, had no intention of visiting. Yet here was irrefutable documentation of my presence inside a building I'd only seen in recovered archival footage. The remaining 16 files followed a pattern I couldn't immediately decode. Different individuals, different time periods, but each one showed someone entering the facility, and each corresponding person, according to records I later cross-referenced, had subsequently disappeared. Eldrith Somner, missing since 1994. His video showed him entering through a rear service door. Giovanna Presky, vanished in 2003. Her footage captured her examining the same corridor I'd seen myself walking through. 13 others, all documented entering Briarwell on dates that hadn't occurred when their videos were allegedly created. All gone without explanation. I should have contacted the authorities immediately, and should have handed over the drive and removed myself from the investigation entirely. Instead, I became obsessed with understanding the mechanism. How could video documentation precede the events it depicted? I spent 48 hours analyzing file metadata. The architecture was impossible. These weren't deep fakes or digital fabrications. The encoding signatures were authentic to the recorded eras. A 1970s file used 1970s compression algorithms that no longer existed in modern software. The phone rang at 3:47 a.m. Caller ID showed Briarwell's decommissioned administrative number, a line that hadn't been active in 32 years. I answered. Static. Underneath it, what might have been voices, speaking in patterns that almost resembled language, but dissolved before forming coherent words. Then, distinctly, someone said my name. Not Corvin, not Mr. Thiele. My full name. The name on my birth certificate that I'd legally changed as an adult. A name I hadn't used in over 2 decades. The line disconnected. What happened next defies conventional documentation practices. I'm including it because this account requires completeness, regardless of how it reflects on my credibility. I began finding photographs in my own archives that I hadn't taken. Images of Briarwell's interior, the corridors, the rooms, close-up shots of those wall markings I'd seen in the predictive footage. According to EXIF data, I'd captured these photographs using my own phone. During time windows, when I was confirmed to be in my laboratory, working on unrelated cases, with colleagues present who could verify my location. The drive continued extracting files autonomously. My recovery software completed its process, but new data kept appearing. Videos of Briarwell's interior filmed from perspectives inside walls, inside floors, angles that couldn't have been captured by any physical camera. I made the decision to destroy the drive. I removed it from my workstation, placed it in a thermal destruct unit, and initiated the disposal protocol. The device reached temperatures exceeding 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit. The next morning, the drive sat on my desk, intact, slightly warm to the touch. The file directory had updated overnight. A new video occupied the final position, time-stamped for today. I watched myself, or something wearing my appearance, standing inside Briarwell's corridor. In the footage, I turned toward the camera and spoke directly to it. You should have come when you were invited." I recognized my own voice, but I've never been inside that building, never recorded that statement, never owned the clothing the figure was wearing. That footage remains on my server. The drive sits locked in a containment safe at an undisclosed facility. I've submitted copies of everything to multiple research institutions, none of which have provided satisfactory explanations. What I know is this: 17 people were documented entering Briarwell before they actually arrived. 17 people subsequently disappeared. My own entrance was recorded. I have not visited the facility. But according to documentation that shouldn't exist, captured by technology that contradicts itself, uploaded to media that predates its own creation, I already have. The Sheriff's Department has since placed Briarwell under permanent restricted access. Armed security patrols the perimeter around the clock. Whatever occupies that facility continues operating its surveillance system, recording events that haven't happened yet, cataloging victims before they become victims. I check my phone's photo gallery every morning now, looking for images I don't remember taking. waiting for evidence of locations I've never visited to appear among my personal files. Eventually, according to documentation I cannot dispute, I'll answer whatever invitation was extended. I'll walk those corridors. I'll find whatever waits in that final room. The footage already exists to prove it. Nobody vanishes inside a shopping mall. That's what I told myself when Prosper County authorities contracted my services in November of 2017. I'm Stellan Briggs, licensed private investigator operating out of central Pennsylvania. Most of my work involves insurance fraud and custody disputes. Occasionally, I handle missing persons when families want supplementary investigation beyond what law enforcement provides. The Renwick Plaza case arrived through an attorney representing 3 separate families. Their adult children, all social media personalities documenting abandoned locations, had entered the defunct shopping center 11 days prior. They'd live-streamed their entry. They'd posted location updates. They'd communicated with followers for approximately 47 minutes. Then, all 3 signals terminated simultaneously. Search teams had swept the building. Canine units found no scent trails beyond the main entrance atrium. Thermal imaging detected no heat signatures. Every accessible section of the 340,000 square foot structure had been examined. Nothing. The families wanted answers. The attorney wanted results. I accepted the contract because abandoned retail spaces don't swallow people. Buildings have finite dimensions. Every corridor leads somewhere. Every room has exits. I was operating on assumptions that would prove catastrophically wrong. Renwick Plaza closed in 2008, following bankruptcy proceedings. The anchor stores had been gutted. Most tenant spaces sat empty. Water damage had compromised sections of the upper level. Standard commercial abandonment. I obtained architectural documentation from the county planning office. Original construction blueprints from 1983, and renovation plans from 1991 and 2001. Everything matched municipal records. My first walkthrough occurred on November 17th. I entered through the main gallery doors at 9:15 a.m. Within 20 minutes, I understood why the search teams had found nothing. The building's interior didn't match its exterior. The blueprints showed a straightforward 2-level design with 4 anchor positions and a central food court. What I found inside was something else entirely. The main corridor extended approximately 50 meters before branching into 3 separate hallways. The blueprints showed 2. I photographed the discrepancy and continued. The third hallway, the one that shouldn't exist, terminated at a directory sign listing stores I couldn't find in any historical records. Names like Vespertine Goods and The Antechamber and Secondhand Hours. Businesses that had never filed commercial licenses, never appeared in newspaper advertisements, never existed in any documentation I could locate. I marked the location on my map and proceeded deeper. The architecture became progressively less rational. Corridors looped back on themselves. Stairwells deposited me on levels that couldn't exist within the building's physical height. I passed the same fountain 3 times while walking in what I believed was a straight line. My phone, GPS, showed my location as 17 miles southwest of the actual building, in the middle of Prosper County Reservoir. I activated my backup compass. The needle spun continuously without settling. This is when I should have evacuated, called for backup. I documented my observations and removed myself from an environment that was actively contradicting physical law. Instead, I found the first camera. It was mounted above what appeared to be a former jewelry store. The lens tracked my approach. I could hear servos adjusting focus as I drew closer. This camera was operational, connected to power, recording footage in a building that had been disconnected from municipal utilities for 9 years. I counted additional cameras as I continued. 14 in total. All functioning. all following my progress through corridors that existing blueprints couldn't account for. The retail spaces I passed had been arranged incorrectly. Mannequins stood in configurations that suggested interrupted activity, reaching for items, gesturing toward empty counters, frozen mid-stride. The storefronts displayed merchandise that appeared both contemporary and antique simultaneously. Clothing styles I couldn't place in any era, products labeled in languages that used English characters but formed no recognizable words. I found the influencer's equipment in what the non-existent directory labeled Anchor Point 7. 3 phones, 3 portable lighting rigs, 3 camera stabilizers, arranged in a precise triangle on the floor of an empty retail space. No signs of struggle, no blood, no indicators of what had separated these individuals from their equipment. The phones were still powered, still recording. The footage showed identical angles of empty tile flooring. Each device's storage contained approximately 267 hours of continuous recording. Impossible given standard battery limitations. I downloaded the files to my portable drive and prepared to exit. The corridors had reconfigured during my investigation. The route I'd mapped no longer existed. The fountain I'd passed 3 times now appeared in a location I hadn't previously explored. Store names had changed. Vespertine Goods now read Briggs & Associates. My company name, rendered in the same faded signage style as the surrounding storefronts. The exit signs pointed in rotating directions. I observed one physically rotating while I watched, the illuminated arrow completing a full 360-degree cycle every 90 seconds. I heard the announcement system activate. Static first. Then a voice. Automated, neutral. The standard recorded tone of retail public address delivered a message that made my stomach clench. Attention shoppers. Stellan Briggs. Will please report to customer service. Your party is waiting. I hadn't provided my name to anyone at this location. My contract was confidential. The families, the attorney, law enforcement. None of them had been inside this building since the initial search. The announcement repeated. Same neutral tone. Same impossible information. I moved toward what I believed was the nearest exterior wall. I would create my own exit if necessary. The tools I carried proved insufficient. Cutting through drywall revealed additional drywall, then brick, then concrete, then materials I couldn't identify, substances that felt organic, that generated warmth, that seemed to pulse when my saw blade made contact. I retreated. The corridors continued multiplying. New hallways appeared between storefronts that had previously been adjacent. The building was growing, expanding, creating additional space from nothing. I located what I believe was the original main entrance at approximately 7:45 p.m. I had been inside for over 10 hours. My documentation showed I'd traveled approximately 19 miles of interior corridor, inside a structure whose exterior measured 400 meters at its longest dimension. The exit doors opened without resistance. November air hit my face. I was outside. But Renwick Plaza hadn't released me entirely. The downloaded footage from those recovered phones showed something I didn't observe during initial review. Timestamps indicated the recordings had been modified after I transferred them. Content had been added. In the new segments, 3 figures walked through corridors that appeared normal. Standard retail architecture, functioning lights, clean floors. They documented their exploration cheerfully. Standard influencer content. Then they encountered a 4th figure, someone waiting at the center of an empty anchor store. The footage degraded before showing what happened next. Audio continued for an additional 30 seconds. Sounds I cannot adequately describe. Sounds that seemed to come from distances that couldn't exist inside any recording space. I've since submitted my findings to researchers studying spatial anomalies. The phones remain in evidence. The footage continues updating periodically, adding new content without being connected to any network or power source. Renwick Plaza was demolished in 2018. Municipal records confirm the structure no longer exists, but satellite imagery periodically shows lights inside the vacant lot. Emergency services have received calls placed from phones using the building's internal extension numbers. The three influencers have never been found. Their equipment continues recording. Their devices remain powered by sources I cannot explain. I avoid shopping malls entirely now. All commercial retail spaces, regardless of operational status. Because I understand something most people don't. Some buildings don't follow architectural rules. Some spaces exist in dimensions that cartography cannot measure. And some locations, once you've entered, never fully release you. I still receive notifications from those recovered phones. Updates to footage I downloaded. New content appearing in files that should be static. Last week, I appeared in one of the videos. I was standing in a corridor I don't remember entering, for waving at the camera, smiling. The timestamp shows a date 3 months from now. I haven't decided what that means yet. But I suspect when that date arrives, I'll understand, whether I want to or not. Language defines reality. I understood this academically before the Thornfield case. Now I understand it as a survivor. Detective Imogen Varro, Cult Crimes Division, Philadelphia Metropolitan Jurisdiction. 14 years investigating organized ritual activity, recruitment patterns, and psychological manipulation networks. I've witnessed human beings commit unspeakable acts in service of belief systems manufactured by charismatic predators. Nothing prepared me for a crime scene where the crime was the investigation itself. February 9th, 2018. Dispatch routed me to a residential address in the Germantown district. The responding officers had evacuated immediately after initial entry, citing environmental instability. Their body camera footage showed approximately 11 seconds of interior documentation before all 3 devices failed simultaneously. The homeowner, Cressida Halloway, 67, retired linguistics professor, had been reported missing by neighbors who noticed 17 days of accumulated mail. Standard welfare check. Routine entry through an unlocked rear door. What officers found inside wasn't standard. Every interior surface, walls, ceiling, floors, furniture, appliances, had been covered in written symbols. Not spray paint, not marker. The substance appeared biological. Laboratory analysis would later identify it as a compound containing human cerebrospinal fluid, mixed with materials that technicians couldn't classify. The symbols themselves formed no recognizable alphabet. Characters combined geometric precision with organic flowing curves. They interconnected across surfaces, creating continuous sequences that wrapped around corners, climbed door frames, spread across windows. No body. No blood spatter indicating violence. No signs of forced entry or struggle. Just language, covering everything. My expertise involves decoding cult communication systems, hidden meanings in seemingly innocent texts, recruitment language designed to isolate targets. I've cracked ciphers used by organizations operating across 3 continents. This was different. I photographed the symbols systematically. 847 images documenting every character sequence. I began identifying repeating patterns, clusters that appeared in multiple locations or were arranged in what seemed like deliberate configurations. The first translation attempts produced nothing. The symbols didn't correspond to any documented writing system. Not ancient, not modern, not fictional constructed languages. Nothing in any academic database matched. Then I noticed something that changed my approach entirely. The symbols responded to observation. Characters I'd photographed hours earlier had shifted positions when I returned to verify documentation. Sequences had expanded. New patterns had emerged in spaces I was certain had been blank. This writing was active, growing, adapting. I contacted Dr. Isolde Kemmering at the University of Pennsylvania Linguistics Department. Her specialty involved theoretical language structures, communication systems that could exist but hadn't been documented. She arrived at the scene within 2 hours. Her reaction upon entering disturbed me more than anything I'd witnessed in 14 years of cult investigation. She began crying, not from fear, from recognition. "I've dreamed this alphabet," she said, "every night for 3 months. I thought I was creating it. I thought it was coming from my research." Dr. Kemmering's involvement accelerated our translation progress. She recognized grammatical structures within the symbol sequences. Subject, verb, object patterns, tense indicators, conditional statements. The writing wasn't random. It was coherent communication. Sentences, paragraphs, a complete textual document covering every surface of Cressida Holloway's home. We established a working vocabulary, approximately 40 symbols translated into concepts we could express in English. Words like boundary and membrane and consumption appeared repeatedly. Then we reached the section that mentioned us by name. Not Holloway, not the officers who'd discovered the scene. Our names. Imogen Varro, Isolde Kemmering, written in symbols we hadn't yet translated, but rendered phonetically in a way that made identification unmistakable. The document knew who would investigate it. The document had anticipated our involvement. Dr. Kemmering's hands trembled as she traced the characters. "This section discusses what happens when translation reaches completion," she said. "It's describing a process, an exchange." "Exchange of what?" She didn't answer immediately. When she spoke again, her words came slowly, carefully, as though she was having difficulty forming them. Existence. The text acquires the translator through comprehension. The more we understand. She stopped speaking, not paused, stopped. Her mouth continued moving. Her lips formed word shapes, but no sound emerged. Nothing. Dr. Kemmering had lost the ability to vocalize, not physically. Medical examination later confirmed her vocal apparatus remained undamaged, but whatever neurological connection allowed thought to become speech had been severed. Cleanly, completely. She could write, could type, could communicate through text. But spoken language, the ability to convert mental concepts into acoustic expression, had been extracted. I evacuated her from the premises immediately, called for additional support, requested the scene be sealed pending hazardous materials assessment. When backup arrived, they found me sitting on the front lawn, but unable to tell them what had happened. I couldn't remember the words. Basic vocabulary had vanished. I knew what I wanted to communicate, could picture the concepts clearly. But the verbal labels, the sounds and syllables that represented those ideas, had disappeared from accessible memory. Building became an empty space in my mind. Evidence dissolved when I reached for it. Help existed as an emotion without linguistic form. The symbols had taken something from me. The more I'd understood their meaning, the more they'd consumed my capacity for meaning. I spent 11 days in neurological observation. Speech returned gradually, word by word, like learning language again as an infant. Basic nouns first, then verbs. Adjectives emerged last. Dr. Kemmering never recovered her voice. She communicates exclusively through written text now. Her eyes carry something I recognize, the haunted awareness of someone who glimpsed a mechanism that shouldn't exist. The Holloway residence was demolished following decontamination protocols. Every photograph I'd taken corrupted within 72 hours. The images degraded into visual static that, when examined closely, contained the same geometric symbols we'd spent days translating. Our working vocabulary documents disappeared from 3 separate secure servers. Backup drives failed. Physical notes combusted spontaneously. Every record of our translation progress erased itself, except what remained in our minds. I still recognize fragments. Passing graffiti sometimes contains characters that trigger translation instincts, and certain arrangements of architectural elements suggest syntactic patterns. Street signs occasionally rearrange themselves into messages I almost comprehend. The language didn't die when we sealed that scene. It dispersed, spread into environmental details, embedded itself in visual noise that most observers filter unconsciously. Those who've seen it, truly begun understanding, carry permanent sensitivity. We notice the symbols others overlook. We read messages in randomness that might not be random at all. Cressida Holloway was never found. No body, no evidence of departure. She simply wasn't anymore. Erased so thoroughly that even her academic publications have begun disappearing from library archives. Colleagues struggle to remember her face. Former students can't recall her name. She translated too completely, understood too thoroughly, and the understanding consumed her entirely. I limit my pattern recognition now. Force myself to look away when familiar geometries appear in peripheral vision, because I know what waits inside complete comprehension. The language is patient. The language is persistent. The language is still writing itself across surfaces I encounter daily. And every time I catch myself beginning to read it, beginning to translate, I remember what translation costs. I remember Isolde's silent screaming as words abandoned her forever. I remember the 11 days I spent unable to name my own terror. Some communications aren't meant for human reception. Some alphabets exist specifically to unmake the minds that learned them. I encountered such an alphabet. I survived because I stopped reading before understanding became complete. But I'll never know how close I came, how many more symbols stood between me and total erasure. Some nights, I'm afraid to find out. The autopsy revealed an organ that human beings don't possess. That was October 4th, 2016. By October 19th, I'd connected 11 additional cases across 7 states. By October 31st, I discovered I carried the same biological anomaly. Dr. Thessaly Muir, Chief Forensic Pathologist, Allegheny County Medical Examiner's Office. 23 years examining the dead to determine how they died. Thousands of autopsies. Countless variations in human anatomy that fell within expected parameters. The Reinhold case exceeded all parameters. Gabriel Reinhold, 34, discovered deceased in his vehicle at a rest stop along Interstate 76. Initial assessment suggested cardiac event. No visible trauma. No signs of struggle. Standard natural causes presentation. Internal examination contradicted that assessment immediately. Reinhold's thoracic cavity contained a structure I couldn't identify. Positioned between the liver and diaphragm, approximately the size of a tennis ball, composed of tissue that didn't match any documented human organ. Vascularized, innervated, fully integrated into surrounding anatomy, as though it had developed naturally throughout his lifetime. I've consulted on cases involving congenital abnormalities, vestigial structures, developmental anomalies that produce unexpected anatomical formations. None of those experiences prepared me for what laboratory analysis returned. The tissue wasn't human. So DNA sequencing produced results that our equipment flagged as errors. The sample contained human genetic markers. Approximately 63% matched Reinhold's confirmed genome. The remaining 37% corresponded to nothing in any biological database. Not animal, not plant, Not bacterial or viral, not synthetic. Unknown origin, unknown function, unknown explanation. I submitted queries to colleague networks across multiple jurisdictions. Had anyone encountered similar anatomical anomalies? Any unexplained organ structures? Any DNA results that defied classification? The responses arrived faster than anticipated. Dr. Orinthia Sable in Seattle had documented an identical structure in a drowning victim 7 months prior. Dr. Emmerich Vance in Boston reported 3 cases over 2 years, all ruled natural causes, and all containing the same unclassified organ. Additional confirmations arrived from Miami, Denver, Minneapolis, Tulsa. 17 documented instances. 17 victims with identical biological anomalies. 17 deaths attributed to various natural causes, none connected to each other until my inquiry. I coordinated a case review conference, shared files, compared findings, searched for commonalities that might explain this pattern. The victims had no demographic connections, different ages, different ethnicities, different occupations, locations, lifestyles, no shared physicians, no common medications, no environmental factors linking their residences, but their genetic anomalies matched precisely. The same unknown sequences, the same organ structure, the same impossible biology. Dr. Sable proposed a theory that others initially dismissed. The organ, she suggested, wasn't a mutation or developmental abnormality. It was an implant, something introduced to these individuals at some point during their lives, something that grew, integrated, became indistinguishable from native tissue. Her theory gained credibility when we examined mortality patterns. All 17 victims had died within 72 hours of their first documented illness. Healthy individuals with no prior medical concerns suddenly experiencing acute systemic failure. Their bodies simply stopped functioning, as though a switch had been thrown. Reinhold had called his physician complaining of mild fatigue on October 2nd. 47 hours later, he was dead. The organ wasn't passive, it was active, regulatory, controlling physiological functions until some threshold triggered terminal shutdown. I requested expanded DNA analysis on tissue samples from all 17 cases, looking for evidence of introduction, scars, injection sites, surgical intervention, any indication of how this structure entered their bodies. The results eliminated every conventional explanation. The organ had grown from embryonic development. It was present in these individuals from conception, integrated into their earliest cellular differentiation, part of their original biological architecture. But the DNA it contained didn't exist in either parent's genome, didn't exist in any human lineage, didn't exist anywhere in documented biology. Something had modified these people before they were born, and something had introduced genetic material that shouldn't exist into their developmental process. Something had been cultivating biological investments across decades. My investigation escalated to federal coordination. This pattern suggested systematic activity, deliberate modification of human subjects at scale. The Bureau expressed initial skepticism, but case file volume demanded attention. I underwent comprehensive medical examination as standard protocol for personnel involved in potential biohazard investigations. Full imaging, complete blood work, genetic screening. The radiologist called me personally. Dr. Muir, I'm observing an anomalous structure in your thoracic cavity, positioned between the liver and diaphragm. I'd like to schedule immediate follow-up. I knew what she'd found before she finished speaking. Subsequent analysis confirmed what I'd already understood. The organ, the impossible DNA. The same biological configuration I documented in 17 deceased individuals. I carry the same structure. I contain the same genetic modifications. Whatever process selected and modified those victims had selected and modified me. The deaths weren't murders. They weren't accidents. They weren't natural causes. They were collections, harvesting, targeted removal of biological assets that had reached maturation. Something invested genetic material into human developmental processes. Something cultivated those investments across decades of normal human lifespan. Something retrieved its investments when conditions aligned. I exist as inventory, walking, breathing stock awaiting collection. Federal investigation continues, for additional cases emerge weekly. Deceased individuals whose autopsies reveal the same impossible organ. The victim count exceeds 400 confirmed instances nationwide. International colleagues report similar findings. This pattern operates globally. No perpetrator has been identified. No methodology has been established. No explanation accounts for how genetic modification occurs at conception without surgical intervention or technological trace. What we know? Something non-human is breeding with our species, not through conventional reproduction, through cellular infiltration at the earliest developmental stages, inserting its own biological code into human embryos, creating hybrid organisms that appear entirely normal until collection occurs. What we don't know: why? What purpose these harvested organs serve? What process triggers collection timing? How many modified individuals currently exist unaware of their condition? I could be collected tomorrow, could be collected in 30 years, could never be collected at all. The pattern reveals no predictable timeline. I've documented everything. Submitted my own tissue samples to independent laboratories, ensured my autopsy instructions specify comprehensive organ examination and genetic sequencing. When collection occurs, if collection occurs, I want records to survive, want evidence to accumulate, want whoever inherits this investigation to understand what they're confronting. We assume we know what human means. We assume our biology follows understood rules. We assume our bodies belong to us. I possessed those assumptions until October 2016. Now, I carry proof that something else has been writing code into human genetics for purposes we cannot fathom. Cultivating harvests we cannot prevent. Operating across scales we cannot comprehend. I examine the dead professionally. I determine their causes of death. I document their conditions. Soon, someone will examine me, will discover the same structure I've documented hundreds of times, will add my case to the pattern I first identified. The collection will occur. The harvest will complete. I remain uncertain whether that terrifies me, or whether it simply confirms what the evidence already demonstrates. We were never alone in our own bodies. We were never the only authors of our own biology. Something else has been editing human source code since before written history, and it hasn't finished its work. Those were 4 documented cases where investigation became something far more dangerous than anyone anticipated. Cold case files that contained warnings instead of evidence. Architectural impossibilities that trapped those who entered. Languages designed to consume their translators. Biological modifications hidden within our own genetics. These accounts remind us why certain professions carry weight most civilians never consider. Investigators, researchers, forensic specialists, they walk into situations where the unknown hasn't been cataloged yet, where the rules haven't been written, where understanding itself becomes hazardous. If you work in any investigative field, document everything. Trust your instincts when environments feel wrong. Establish communication protocols with colleagues who can intervene if contact lapses. Some discoveries protect us. Others demonstrate why certain questions remained unanswered for so long. Thank you for watching. If these accounts affected you, share them with someone who appreciates this content. Subscribe if you haven't already, drop a like, and tap the bell for all notifications to ensure you never miss what comes next. Stay aware, stay skeptical, stay safe. Until next time.